Hello, my fiends. This is Tom McLoughlin, writer-director of Jason Lives, Friday the 13th, Part 6. And you're listening to Don't Go Out There's podcast. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
In a world where zombies, ghosts, serial killers, and vampires all exist, it's Nico, Brian, Mike, and Dustin, and they are all that stand between you and the films that could end the world. Welcome to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Review Podcast. Just want to thank all our fans and listeners. I really appreciate all support. Super excited for this upcoming interview. We are joined today by another legend of the business, known best for writing and directing Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. Writer, director, and producer, Mr. Tom McLoughlin. Tom, this is such an honor. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm a huge, huge fan of Jason Lives. I'm super excited to have you on.
I'm very happy, as Elvis would say, my boys, beyond here.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we just kind of like to start off all our interviews, by just asking, what is it that kind of got you into show business? And, did you have your eyes set on Hollywood ever since you were a kid? I mean, I know you were in rock and roll, obviously, big time in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. Well, I had a very interesting sort of like, I'm doing it like it or not. My father came to Los Angeles from Detroit to be a filmmaker, and he went to USC Film School. And he graduated in 1949. And of course, in those days, nobody wanted any filmmaker from, college. You can't learn film in college. So, he ended up getting a regular job, but still had that desire. He ended up marrying my mother and moving into Culver City with the backlots of MGM there. So I grew up in this environment where I was surrounded by old, sound stages and things from the great era of movie making. And I got a hold of an 8mm camera, and on the weekends, me and my friends would crawl under the fence in the back lots and start making movies. So most of my childhood was a combination of making films and also doing magic, which is what my dad did. Was that he was a magician and a fire eater. So It really kind of went into my veins where I was, kind of inheriting my father's dream. And the only other time I ran into somebody that was just like that, and he went nuts when we met each other, was Eddie Van Halen. And
wow.
Eddie went, oh man. And he just hugged me so hard. He said, I've never met anybody that did the same thing because that's what I was doing. I was living my dad's dream to be a musician. So, I thought, well, yeah, I guess that kind of happens. Sometimes you go in kicking and screaming into, parents' world of what it was they wanted to be when, but for me, it was a blessing.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, hey, early on, tell us a little bit about, your Emmy nomination, kind of how you came to write on Dick Van Dyke and Company.
Well, I went from my movie passion into rock and roll when the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all those groups.
Nice. There you go.
And so, I got thrown out of 8 high schools for having long hair. And that was at a period in the 60s where, you could not have your hair any longer than touching the top of your ears. But I wanted to do that, and that was it. And we opened for the Doors, Iron Butterfly, all these, great groups of the 60s. And we were still 15, 16-year-old punks, but we know. By the time it got to 69, and the whole scene here in Los Angeles had gotten very ugly with the Charles Manson murders. Obviously, a lot of my, legendary heroes, Jim Morrison and, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, all these people that I saw in Monterey Pop Festival, had died of overdose. Other people, same thing that I knew. So I kind of got out of the rock and roll world and got into mine. And I was invited to Paris by Marcel Marceau, where I went over there when I was 19, 20. And I thought, this could make me a more interesting lead singer. I could do shit on stage that Mick Jagger wasn't doing, that James Brown wasn't doing, all these guys who I loved their performing. But then I kind of fell in love with comedy when I was there and started, being able to write sketches of like visual comedy stuff, and came back to the United States absolutely penniless. band had moved on. My girlfriend had moved on. So I moved on to the streets and became a performer. And whatever I made in the hat that day was how I ate that night and scored away some for rent. But that led from one thing to the other with the mime thing that eventually I formed a group called the LA Mime Company. We were invited on to the Dick Van Dyke series, Van Dyke and Company, which was like 1975, 76. And Dick said, well, who writes your material? And I said, well, I do. And he goes, would you write stuff for me and whoever, guest stars? So here I was, this, 26, 27-year-old kid who was now writing and directing Lucille Ball and Freddie Prinze and Chevy Chase and Carol Burnett. And I mean, all these legendary comic legends. It was amazing for somebody of my age. And I was fortunate enough that the show was nominated, for writing. And it was the same year that it was the first year for Saturday Night Live. So they got 3 of those nominations, Carol Burnett, and we were the other 2. And we knew full well that Saturday Night Live would be the one. But it got me into the Writers Guild. It made me realize, I can write comedy. But that wasn't where I kind of made my breakthrough. It was obviously in horror.
Yes, sir. Tom, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask some things about Jason Lives. Can you tell us how that project kind of fell in your lap at that time? And when did you see the first 5 films?
Well, that's a great story, actually, because the first horror thing I wrote was called One Dark Night. Originally, we called it Mausoleum, and then we shot it under the title Rest in Peace. But then they decided, One Dark Night was going to be the name of it, and we made it for under $1 million, quite a bit under. And that was the kind of horror movies I wanted to do, kind of gothic, throwback to the Hammer horror movies and the Edgar Allan Poe, Roger Corman films. But, if you wanted to get a job as a horror director, you needed to be making a slasher film. That's what was happening. Halloween, to me, is still one of the best films ever, not even just a slasher movie, just, straight up. And same thing, The Exorcist is like my all-time favorite. But I wasn't interested in all the offers of, look, we're going to go out and kill a bunch of girls, and gotta just come up with something to go over the guy's head, and we'll give you the money, to do that. It's like, I don't, it just, to me, wasn't what movie making should be. So when the offer came along, it was kind of like, I don't know, can I do something different? What do you mean? Can I put humor in it? You make fun of Jason? No, not make fun of Jason. Make the characters have a sense of humor. And hell, guys, it's the 6th one. We got to have some sort of fun about the fact that, this is like a franchise now. Only James Bond was like that. So that's why I put the James Bond opening.
Love that scene. Fantastic.
So, to basically set the tone, like, guys, this is not going to be, just straight ahead. I'm going to have a sense of humor about it. And breaking the fourth wall, telling the audience some folks have a strange idea of entertainment. I mean, stuff like that to try to set it apart. And I didn't know if it was going to do well. I thought the fans might crucify me for, doing one like that. But much to my absolute shock, amazement, and humility, 36 years now, it's for so many people their favorite. And it's sort of like the, entry drug, in the world of slashers. It's like, here, if you can watch this, you can watch this next one. I somehow got it sort of in the middle of it's a sort of straight ahead movie, with a hero and a villain, and they both have agendas, and then putting the kids in, the underwater fights, the car chase, all that stuff made it a little more of a movie than just a, straight ahead slasher piece.
Absolutely.
So it kind of worked out, that thing of being kind of stubborn, and, and they just gave me complete creative freedom. The only thing they took away was Jason's father. I had a scene introducing Jason's father, and they were afraid people might think the next one would be about that, and they didn't want the audience to get pissed off like they did at the end of part 5. I was like, oh shit, that wasn't even Jason. Oh, wait a minute, is Tommy Jarvis going to be? Oh, screw this, I'm not going to go and see the next one. And it, it definitely hurt our opening box office because we followed Aliens, one of the best horror movies ever.
Right.
The second week, people were like, hey, dude, what do you want to do? I don't know. Like Friday the 13th. No, fuck that. You got to go see Aliens. Come on, So, it took a while for sort of word of mouth to kind of create, the buzz on that movie that, it was bringing him back, and it was bringing him back in a way. Now he's like Terminator, unstoppable,
Yeah.
full of life, and nothing you can do to kill this dude now.
Yes, sir. It's funny you mentioned, the James Bond scene, the opening. I think the opening scene's incredible. This was the introductory horror movie for me, so it's truly an honor to have you on. Obviously
Thank
Jason
you.
Lives is such a favorite amongst the fans. We've had Tom, CJ, Darcy all on our show. One of the reasons I think
Oh,
it's such
good.
a fan favorite is the characters are all actually, likable, which is obviously going against the grain in a lot of horror movies. A lot of
Absolutely.
characters are pretty awful, but we like all these characters. Can you talk about your thought process in writing your characters like that?
Well, absolutely. People have said for years, like, well, who's your mentor? Who inspired you? And I said, Frank Capra. So what? What is Frank Capra? It's a Wonderful Life. I said,
right.
absolutely. What I learned from Capra, and he literally was a mentor to me, where I would send him scripts. Like my next movie, Date with an Angel, was all very much a tribute to what I learned from Frank Capra. But what Capra taught me is, if you like the characters, you will be rooting for them. You will be involved. You will not be, distanced and feel like you're just waiting for, oh, please, kill this bitch. Geez, she's getting on my nerves. I didn't want to go that route, and I hated in theaters where that's what they would be chanting. Kill her, yeah, tear her up. I thought, this is like guillotine, people in France. And I thought, no, I want you to go, oh shit, I like them. Shit, if it's going to kill, it's like Hitchcock did with Psycho. You kill Janet Leigh in the first half hour. You go, oh shit, now what? So,
Right.
I wanted to kind of go that route where you did care. They had a sense of humor, and there was a real spark between Tom Matthews and Megan, Jennifer Cook. And that was great to have, because that was very much like the 1940s kinds of characters that, had these zingers that go back and forth where they were knocking each other, but at the same time they were flirting. And, Darcy and Tom Fridley, that whole rapport back and forth was great fun, and it was that kind of thing where all of us, and I'm sure they probably told you, we're still close friends. 36 years later, we still, I get, texts every day from one or the other of them. And of course, if we're going to do a convention, then we all are, it's like a, family reunion. So it's been a really, really wonderful experience that has gone on, long past the movie.
Yes, you could. You mentioned your connection to music and the music industry, and I'm a music head myself. All the bands you mentioned is kind of what I grew up on as well. The soundtrack to Jason Lives, almost 35 years old now, still regarded as one of the best 80s horror soundtrack there is. Outside of, Nightmare 3 is the only one that comes close. I'm sure that was heavily influenced by, your installment here earlier, but talk about how Alice Cooper came to be involved in the soundtrack.
Well, here's the very cool thing, guys. In the mid-'60s, and we were playing all these different clubs and venues in Los Angeles. No one was ever carded for how old you were. They didn't really care. There was a group that we played on the same bill a number of times with called the Nazz. And the lead singer in that group was a guy named Vincent. And I, knew him from the gigs, but it was just like, hey, dude, how you doing? Hey, bro. And, we would go to Frank Zappa's house sometimes where everybody kind of hung out in Laurel Canyon. And there was groups like the Byrds and all the other sort of Laurel Canyon type folks there. And so I would talk to him, on and off. And, it wasn't like we were close, but, we were aware of each other. All these years later, Vincent became Alice Cooper. And all those guys, they had to drop the name the Nazz because Todd Lundgren had a group called the Nazz. So I don't know what is really true in the legend of how Alice Cooper's name came about. I've heard everything, and the one I like the best is Frank Zappa came up with, just call yourselves Alice Cooper, the whole group. And then eventually he just made it, his name.
Right.
So all these years later, we were at the end of the movie, and I was putting in AC/DC. I was putting in everything that I thought would be cool. And I put, an Alice song in there. And Frank Mancuso said, oh, you like Alice? I go, yeah. And I told him the story I just told you guys. And he goes, they're looking, to do something like with this film if you're interested. And I said, shit, yeah, of course. So, yeah, Alice came up, with the Man Behind the Mask song. And it was a little different. It was a little more a hard rock groove to it, which I loved. But they decided, we got to do it again, but make it a little more 80s with the kind of 80s sound.
Synth, yeah,
the
that's
synth
synth.
sound,
Yeah.
exactly. So to this day, guys, the last time I spoke to Alice Cooper was 1966.
Oh, wow.
Through that whole process, never once did we have, we tried, and I was, really trying hard to do the music video because that was something that meant a lot to me. But the record label already had the guy they always worked with, to do that, and then they just used clips from the movie and stuff. But every time, like in a convention or whatever, either he couldn't do it because his tour schedule changed, or something came up for me and I couldn't make it. So we've yet to have that reunion. But in my group, the Sloths, we would do Man Behind the Mask, and I'd go out of my way to be as close to Alice's interpretation. But we also did the hard rocker version of it as well. And some fan told me that he met Alice and brought this up, and Alice said, "Yeah, one day Tom and I got to do that together on stage." So I'm waiting for that bucket list thing to happen because that would be the ultimate.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, just shifting gears a little bit. I mean, you kind of brought it up earlier. Date with an Angel. It's a pretty special movie for you, I know. Can you talk a little bit about that? What it kind of took to convince studios and producers and everybody to get that movie made?
Well, you also got to understand, with Date with an Angel, when I first wrote it and wanted to do it, there was no E.T., there was no Splash, there was no Mannequin, there wasn't any of this sort of being in love with a fantasy character, whether it was a female or a little rubber alien. So the doors, definitely stayed closed on them. Any opportunity to do that. At that time, I had not directed anything, so I had no credit, to go by. All I had was the encouragement from Frank Capra, looking at the script and encouraging me. And Frank was the first person that said this to me long before Nike ever put it on the T-shirt. Just do it. And every time I had any kind of rejection or whatever, he goes, "Tom, nobody wanted the movies that I was going to make until I got involved with Harry Cohen at Columbia. And, once things started to get successful. So all I can tell you, just do it. Don't listen to it, just do it." Well, it took, till I got Friday the 13th finished, and Frank Mancuso and his father, Frank Sr., who ran Paramount, introduced me to Dino De Laurentiis. Dino said, "What do you want to do next?" I said, "This is what I wanted to do for years." So by the time that happened, E.T. had come and gone, Splash had come and gone, all these things. So it wasn't as unique. And, a lot of the reviews brought that up. "Oh, this guy probably watched Splash and just decided to do a variation." So that certainly bugged me. But the whole passion behind it was I knew a guy who had died in his late 20s of a brain aneurysm. And he had no idea he had that. And I thought, that's so friggin' heartbreaking.
Wow.
Where's God and all that? And then I thought, well, if the guy's going to die, wouldn't it be great if an angel was coming to take him? This gorgeous angel. So the whole thing of death would not be so horrible. Yet she collides, breaks her wing, and now he ends up, saving her out of the swimming pool and falls in love with her and she with him. And that's kind of where the story would sort of go. And all the characters in there are based on real friends of mine that I grew up with. Don, George, and Rex were musician friends of mine through the 60s. And just everything about it really kind of was my feeling about life and wanting to believe that fantasy could step in when you most needed it. So it was a real, passion piece that, came and went, in a weekend because the company had gone bankrupt. And I thought, well, so much for that. My son was born that same year. So I went, all right, well, God gave me him, and this, I guess, did my best with. But the funny thing, because in the wonderful world of VHS, beta first, VHS, then obviously, DVDs and Blu-rays and all the rest of it, it's become sort of this cult underground classic because a lot of kids saw it when they were really young. And I was down south doing a number of movies, and they go, "Oh yeah, that's our slumber party movie." So what's that? Yeah, when the girls want something, we go and, this is the one we pick on, and it's not going to offend anybody. So, that's kind of was its own little blessing. And I've had a number of people too who have just, their parents loved it and play it every holiday and make them all watch it, like we watch It's a Wonderful Life at Christmas.
Right.
So it's in the long run it's found its place. kind of where the audience that loves that kind of thing, goes.
Absolutely. Hey, and I know Michael Knight obviously played the title role, but
Yeah.
is it true that you almost had Jim Carrey in there?
Well, I saw Jim. I guess was it Once Bitten? I can't remember if that came out at that time or after that, but I saw he was on a TV series, and I saw his comedy act
Right.
at the Comedy Store where I was performing, and I just thought, man, he is so funny. He's so physical. He's my first choice. So I got a hold of him, and he literally was the first person I brought in and felt like, he's the guy. Dino De Laurentiis, older Italian, mogul from the past, he goes, Tom, this kid, he's a funny kid, but he's not the good looking kid. He's a handsome kid. And it's like, this guy is going to be a star. What else you got? So, I mean, we went through David Duchovny, and I can't remember all these people. Uma Thurman for The Angel, on and on and on. And finally, we got down to three guys. Michael was one of them, and I really loved Michael. He certainly had a huge following from the soap opera. Really nice guy, also very funny. And, that's the direction, we went. And Phoebe Cates is like an 80s, goddess. So I was very, blessed to get her. And then Emmanuel Bayard, after seeing, count them, 6,000 girls, either on tape or in person. And Dino paid for me to go all over the world to meet the most gorgeous models, any of the upcoming actresses that there was any kind of buzz about. And it was, of course, I wrote it when I was single because I thought, what a great way to meet the future wife. Picking of all the great, gorgeous women. But by that point, not only was I married, I also had a child on the way. So it was like, no hanky-panky. So, but Emmanuelle, I saw her in a movie when I was over in Paris, and she was the biggest star at that time. And I went after her and convinced her to do it. So, she, of course, has gone on to be quite a legend there in Europe. But, after mine, I think she did Mission Impossible and maybe one other thing, but never really kind of, crossed the pond and, made a big success over here. But I don't even think she was that interested in that kind of success. I think she really liked doing smaller art kind of movies. Yeah. But so it was, there was, as I said, so much personal in there. And if you get the Blu-ray and listen to my commentary, you'll hear every reason for all the songs that are in there. And, because we had a really wonderful, group of songs from the Cars.
Absolutely.
And all kinds
Absolutely.
Of
Yeah. You were asked to write for the short-lived Friday the 13th series. You got a 2-part episode titled The Prophecies. 3 years removed from Jason Lives, how was it like kind of jumping back into that mindset or that universe?
Well, I had no desire to do television, at all. Frank Mancuso had me over one night and talked to me about this Friday the 13th series. And I went, really? Seriously? And he goes, yeah. And I said, Jason, every week? No. We're going to make it like just calling it Friday the 13th because that sells. The real name of it is Friday's Curse, and that's the way we're going to shoot it in Canada under that title. That's the way it's going to be released overseas. Right. But when here, we're going to use the name. I think, you don't think fans are going to be pissed off when it's not Jason?
Right. Sounds a lot like Halloween 3 to me. Yeah.
So, he told me the premise about, the antique shop with all these cursed objects, and these three people have to go out and keep bringing them back and, risk their lives to get these things. And I thought, well, it's cool. I just think, if you could call it Friday's Curse and not Friday, the 13th, but, that can't deal with the business side of this industry.
Right.
So he went into the first season with it, and then he came to me and said, would you be interested in, being story editor in Los Angeles, because they have a story editor in Canada. So that sort of was the beginning where I would come in and start looking at scripts and things. And then there was one that he asked me if I wanted to direct, which is called Master of Disguise, which I thought was a very cool premise. It was John Wilkes Booth makeup case. And
oh, wow.
It just felt like, well, that's kind of a cool premise, and hire an actor who looks sort of like an adult and, like James Bond, but he really was very deformed and ugly, but he'd kill and use his makeup sponge, slop up the blood and put it on his face and, transform. And then that led to, since I had now had 2 children, to be writing the Playhouse, which was, I created a kind of a kids' playhouse that looks exactly like the Bates, home, Nolan Bates' house. And kids could abduct other kids into it, and they would sort of like give the house these kids, and in turn they could fly, they could do anything they wanted in their fantasy. And I thought it was really interesting in that world of where there's missing children. Where did they go? How about if kids were actually abducting these kids to get empowered, which I thought could be an interesting premise. And then finally, as I got into the 3rd season, they said that the Ryan character wanted to leave the show, but they didn't want to kill him because he probably is going to come to his senses and want to come back. That's the way Frank put it. And so they said, you need to get rid of him, but don't kill him. But they got to think he might not be coming back. So I came up with this crazy premise. Oh, he also said it's got to have some sort of an exorcist theme to it. So I came up with this religious idea of this nun that has this power, and Ryan's going to end up killing her, and sort of part of the way of demonizing him, he ends up going back to the child that he was when he, saw his brother getting hit by a car, and he felt it was his fault because he threw the ball that his brother chased. So it was a way to kind of reduce him to a child again, so he couldn't be part of the team, and they could bring in this new character, Steve, and kind of keep going, with the series. So that ended up being a 2-parter for the opening of the 3rd season.
Kind of along those same lines, they asked you to do a sequel for Jason Lives. I've seen interviews where you talk about a Cheech and Chong meet Jason type thing, which sounds great to me.
Yeah.
Can you talk about this? Can you talk a little bit about that and what prompted you to not really take on Jason again?
Well, actually, what occurred was a week after Friday the 13th opened, Jason Lives, and it actually got far better reviews than any of the others had before, and it was purely because the critics would go, look, it's the same crap, killing kids off, but you can't hate it completely because it's making fun of itself, and there's some pretty good jokes in it. And so they actually put it on a better pedestal than before. And when we went to the screenings that first week when it opened, the audience was going crazy. So they felt, it works. So what do you want to do next? What are we doing for part, 7? And I went, Frank, I don't have a clue, man. I put everything I could think of in that. I tried to make the kills really superhuman so nobody could imitate them. Tried to put every element that I thought that it had not done before. And other than Jason's dad, I don't know quite what to do with it. And he said, what about Jason meets Freddy? I said, how the fuck are you going to do that? There with New Line, this is Paramount. He says, I'm working on it. I remember this is like 86, 86, yeah. And so after a week, he came back. He goes, nah, they don't want to do it. I thought we could work a deal out. He said, you got any other ideas? And just off the top of my head, I went, oh, wait a minute, Cheech and Chong are here at Paramount. What about Cheech and Chong meet Jason? And like he laughed, I go, hey, if you're going to make Frankenstein meet the Wolfman, why not have Costello meet Frankenstein or Cheech and Chong meet Jason? And he goes, I just don't think it's the same audience. I said, are you kidding? Man, all of us smoke the same weed. We drink the same beers. They're going to go. They're going to laugh. They're going to scream and yell. And he goes, yeah, but the horror audience isn't going to want to see all this comedy. I said, yeah, they will. And the comedy
absolutely.
I couldn't convince him. it just felt far-fetched. So, I said, well, I'll come back when I come back with something, that works for me. Literally 32 years later was when I finally came up with something that I, loved. But by that point, the movies obviously are in this lawsuit that still isn't 100% resolved. But I came up with two different concepts that when I put them together, I thought this could be a very cool sequel to my movie, 13 years later, set in 1999, and in a forest that is completely snowed in. So it would have elements of like John Carpenter's The Thing, where you couldn't get out, you were stuck in that world. And of course, I found a very, very theatrical and costly way of making Jason come up through a frozen crystal lake, and go after this group of high school Catholic girls who are badass, with an Irish nun who was like the worst nun in the world, like number of the ones I had growing up as a kid. And I thought, this could be really interesting Jews off between that world, them fighting like crazy and not even knowing who this guy is. I mean, they came from another state, so they're completely devoid of any Jason knowledge, as I had in Jason Lives, where they were all very aware of the legend. So I kind of completely, changed up the circumstances. But I couldn't make it as a fan-funded thing. It's just way too expensive with that much snow and cabins and freezing over Crystal Lake. Just that whole idea of having a chase across Crystal Lake. But so, the girl, the famous thing where they always keep falling down. Well, here it makes sense. The faster you go, the quicker you're going to fall. And Jason just is coming, relentless. So I found a lot of things that, you've never seen in the series. But I hit a brick wall when I, put it out there because I thought the legal thing was going to get resolved. But it's they're still going on about who gets what portion of what. And one has Friday the 13th and the other has, Hockey Mask Jason. And they got to work out a deal between them before that can happen.
Yep. Well, you brought up the snow, so let me ask you. I mean, we had Vincent on the show, to promote Never Hike Alone and Never Hike in the Snow. Your concept art, like you said. I mean, I've seen some of that. That obviously you were wanting to go that route that you finally did release. Did you have any influence on Vincent taking that route? In the snow, or I mean, I know even the sequel to 09 remake, I think they were looking at a winter setting possibly as well.
Yeah, it's come up on over the years as a possibility. Most people didn't know quite how to do it, why, because it's a summer camp. If you're going to be in Crystal Lake, you're supposed to be there in the summer. And so I think a lot of people sort of distance themselves from that idea because it didn't really seem to make sense. In the same way, I just finished The Diary of Pamela Voorhees, which is the whole thing that leads up to Pamela and young Jason coming to Crystal Lake. And the whole time I'm going, why has nobody done this? It makes no sense. Right. This is what Victor Miller wanted, was to keep it psychological thriller, killer. He didn't want, a deformed Jason, but now he's embraced it. But I just started thinking, there is a whole incredible, basically Pamela was a serial killer in the middle of the country after World War II into the early 50s. And nobody paid much attention to some woman and some really freaky looking kid, that she had with her. But I found, along with James Sweet, who did Jason Rising and with Vincent, we've been, started kicking this ball back and forth and started putting this thing together. So we basically have a movie, but we're leaning more towards it. It could really be a wonderful, extended series, 8 maybe episodes, 6, 8, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And, because that 10-year time period, there's a lot that happens that turns Pamela into the Pamela we meet on the first one, and Jason from this, mentally retarded, deformed child into this knows one thing, which is to kill because of what he learned from his mother in that course. Right. So it's pretty intense, but also you're going to have empathy for both of these because, people forget that after the war and into the 50s, this country was in a lot of fear. Still, once again, from the Russians, as we've had of recent, and A-bombs, bomb shelters were being built. Communism, everybody who was you didn't trust had to be a communist. So people that came in out of town that they didn't know, didn't trust. So you put these two into that world, among with the fact that she is going to be very protective of her son and all the things that led to his birth. So it just felt to me like it's actually kind of bigger than just a single 90-minute movie. So that's
I think
that sounds great to me.
That sounds absolutely great.
So basically, I have a masked Jason one, and I've got young Jason and Pamela. So I'm hoping one of those two things can happen. And
that would be great.
Hard to know what's going on behind the scenes right now. We keep hearing these stories, people talking, it's coming, it's happening, But, other people I've talked to said, these guys are still so far from coming to an agreement. And it's not them guys. All you fans out there, they have lawyers. And their lawyers want to win big time. And I believe both lawyers are producers. So they, this is their client. And they're protecting, something they want to be a part of too.
Right.
So, that it makes it really difficult if you're not kind of in that immediate club. So it's going to be a lot of me, crawling and like I did at the beginning of my career. It's like I don't give up very easy, but it gets harder and harder as the whole rules and everything changes.
Absolutely.
The world of streaming and things and big movies is about the only ones that can kind of get into the cinema these days.
You're right.
But then the black phone comes along, that does really well.
Yep.
So it's like, hey, and that's not built on any franchise. It's just,
Right.
kind of cool idea.
Right.
So I keep going.
Absolutely. We're not too far away from Halloween, so just a little bit of a fun question here. How does Halloween look at your house? Surely that Part 6 tombstone has to be somewhere as far as your decorations go.
Well, that tombstone actually sits right behind me in my backyard.
There you go.
Nice.
It takes 3 people to lift that son of a bitch. So if you're going to come and steal it, you better have a couple guys with you. Because, it's solid concrete. And the reason for that was when we were in Covington, Georgia, where we were shooting the movie, to get, basically a phony headstone, we'd have to have it ordered in Hollywood, have it made and sent out. And it was cheaper just to go to a guy that makes gravestones and say, hey, can you put Jason Voorhees on this thing? And, yeah, I'll have it to you tomorrow. So, easy, quick, fun. But, I'm dragging it around from house to house along with Jason's coffin, which is down in my basement. And I've done quite a few podcasts from in the coffin. And
nice.
I just, been holding on to them because they're like 2 very great treasures to have.
Right.
At one point, the Motion Picture Academy, Guillermo del Toro, that said, if you have anything you might want to give to the Academy. And I said, well, I guess if I was going to let it go to some place where other fans, everybody could see it, I guess that would be the place. But I was in the middle of a divorce. The opposing lawyer would not let me remove anything from the house, including those. So unfortunately, that opportunity went past. So now I'm just, holding on to them till some, great day if I decided to part with them in some way. I don't know. And I have no idea what they're really worth. It could be all over the place. But I just really want people to be able to see them. And when I have guests over here, they'll take pictures around them or sitting in the coffin. I used to bring them to shows, so that they could have it, if we're going to show the movie, could also come and sit in the coffin too. So, they're 2 very cool props to have.
That is very cool.
I'll buy the coffin from you.
Hey, that's a rich guy talking there. Yeah.
Tom, this wasn't in the script, but I mentioned it earlier. My 2 co-hosts probably heard this story 300 times now. They probably don't even want me to tell it again. But Jason Lives was the very first horror movie I ever saw as a little kid. 6, 7 years old. Me and my little brother and babysitter got it from Blockbuster or something like that. Took me 30 minutes to get through the first 5 minutes just because I was so scared. But I truly love Jason Lives. It's one of the movies that's the most influential for me as a horror fan. I don't even know if I would be on this podcast without it, honestly. So I just wanted to say it was truly an honor to interview you, talk to you, pick your brain a little bit, and I just want to say thank you for coming on our show. Is there anything you'd like to plug right now? Anything going on in your life that you'd like to tell our audience?
Well, I'd love to return that favor, that compliment. That was great, man. I really appreciate that. And every time I hear that, I think, oh, come on, I just made a movie. But then I think if I got to meet James Whale, who did, Frankenstein and Bride and some of those people, I would go crazy because, I was that little kid in front of the TVs, when in the 50s watching. And in those days, you would see, because the way they did the deals is they would show the same movie at 9 o'clock, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, on one of the local stations here. So as a kid, you could sit in front of there and just have that, whole movie memorized come Saturday. And with your friends, you could start, doing the lines back and forth because there was no DVD, so no second shot. If you went and saw something in the theaters, it was gone forever, so until all of this obviously changed. But the influences of all that stuff, it's all over that movie. There would be no resurrection of Jason with the lightning bolt if it wasn't for Frankenstein, and I had to do a nod to Karloff by calling the market Karloff's, market. And everything I wanted it to have people say, look, we're all fans here, we're all part of the same geek blood. that we love this stuff and we want to be part of that family of like, yeah, we always felt like we weren't really understood, just like these guys were, but they got to speak for us and they represent us. So anytime I hear that and think about, how those influences hit me as a kid, it's like, yeah, same with you guys seeing these things in the, when they came out, in DVD and VHS. And, so many people come up to me and they've seen the movie twice as many times as I have. It's like, really? And he goes, yeah, it's like comfort food in this weird way, but
Absolutely.
I can put on some of these movies anytime, any place, and just like, like in a warm bath, just going, yeah, this is great, So I really appreciate the compliment. Something to say, yeah, music-wise, I've had this band, The Sloths, we've been doing for the last 10 years. We've, kind of resurrected what we were in '66, doing the same music that we did, the cover songs and stuff, and then kind of created our own stuff and actually got a vinyl album out of it, which, is available online and things. But then COVID really kind of shut us down. Everybody's a little bit older, considerably, and we were a band of basically 60-year-olds going in doing music from the 60s. And my whole adage is, look, we're going to rock till we drop, guys. We got an opportunity to get out there and do something we wanted to do at 16, and it's even better now. So I still have that same juice in me. And even though the band is kind of separated due to, everybody kind of retreating, into the trenches and cut off our tour, cut off the second half of the album we were going to do, I said, what would really be fun to do? And I came up with this concept of a band called Horror Rocks. And that's HORROXX, like horror and rock and roll. And I started looking at all the great fucking songs that are in horror movies. And I found like 50 of them. Everything from Killer Clown to Outer Space to Sympathy from the Devil to Pet Cemetery. I mean, the list goes on and on. So I put together this whole list and started talking to people. And I thought, if we could premiere like at some of the horror conventions, like on Saturday night, and rather than just have a band, have a band of, Nucleus would be that, but then bring in, people almost like, Hollywood vampires, people who are in horror movies, either as players in the band or, actually like an actor in there, but they also play, guitar or sing or whatever, and just fill it up with guests, at each one of those things. So if you're a fan of the movies, it's like, great, there's that music. If you're a fan of just the music, there's that. I didn't know that was in that movie. Shit. So, and then have visuals, with like clips and things going on. So it'd really be like this great show. So that's, one of the things I'm involved with now, putting together, getting good members together and trying to see how we can get, booked in some of these conventions, to do that. But to me, it's like, I just feel like this would be something I would love to see on a Saturday night.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. That would be fantastic.
That is a great idea.
Yep.
If Alice happens to be there, Dee Snider, I talked to about this.
There you go.
The bass player from Megadeth, David, I can't remember his last name, but we talked quite a bit about it. Vinnie Vincent from Kiss. All these guys, they do the conventions. So it's like, hey, you want to get up and do a song? So I'm hoping, this again.
That would be awesome.
Tom McLoughlin dreaming, put something like that together and be able to play clubs as well as, the horror conventions. So, I've got, that going on. As I said, the movies, obviously, the scripts. Just have to keep vigilant and hope something works, in that world.
Hope so. Come on.
And then any of you guys who, go on YouTube, there's a supplemental piece that they did with me called Legends Never Die, Hollywood Forever.
Yes.
And that little black and white, I think it's like 5 minutes, 6 minutes short, is about my post days. Once I'm in my crypt, which I bought, and I have instructions on there on what to do, the show goes on, boys. I mean, it's like I've got plans of how to try to create some sort of energy that remains there. We get together every year on my birthday. We've done it for the last 10 years. And we just talk about what's going on in our lives and all the possible things. Nothing about death, just like good, fun, hanging out time.
Awesome.
It's right in front of my crypt. So my hope is that there is such a thing as bioenergy, the very thing I had in my One Dark Night movie, that resides certain places. It certainly resides where there's murders and things that are horrible. And when people go to their grandmother's house or places that you have great memories, you can somehow feel that person. It depends how sensitive you are in those realms. You may hear something, see something, who knows? Other people go, I don't feel a fucking thing, dude. It all depends on kind of like where you're at in that whole yin-yang, positive, negative energy. But I have seen too many things in my life to not say there's more than news, weather, and sports out there. And if you can't figure it out yet, it's because it's not a science. And the science takes 3 times doing something and getting the same result. So we still are looking for that breakthrough. And my crazy idea is trying to be a part of that. And they go, well, you're not even going to know. You're going to be dead. I go, you know what? I know right now. I don't care after that. If it lives on, that's great. All I want to do is set the stage, and it's the rest, up to you all after that. See if you can get something to happen. But, that's sort of my third act once I get through these first 2. But awesome. That's not going to happen until 2050. Just no.
There you go.
I've got no death wish, but I want to hit 100. I don't want to go down to 400.
That'd be great.
Tom, I just want to thank you for your time again, coming on our show. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure, guys. Great meeting you all, too.
Yes, great meeting you as well.
Yes,
thank you again.
Take care, you guys.
Hey, have a good day. Thank you so much.
Have a good one. Thank you again.
Peace out.
Just want to remind everybody.